All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to completely demystify one of the most intensely debated and honestly most misunderstood texts in ancient history, the Book of Revelation. We're going to explore the absolutely stunning imagery of its very first chapter, decode its ancient context, and look at some incredibly fascinating historical parallels. And we are not starting with a slow build-up here. We're kicking things off with an apocalyptic lightning bolt. Because according to our source material, to really grasp this text, we actually have to confront a pretty shocking truth about its very first word.
This completely shatters our modern misconception of the word apocalypse. When we hear that word today, our minds instantly go to fiery doomsdays, right? Or some kind of zombie wasteland. But look at the original Greek term, apocalypsis. It doesn't mean some mysterious secret code designed to confuse us, and it definitely doesn't just mean destruction. It literally translates to an unveiling or uncovering. Imagine sitting in a theater, and suddenly, a heavy curtain is pulled back to reveal the hidden mechanics, what's actually been running behind the scenes of human politics and earthly empires this whole time. That is exactly what this book is trying to do.
So that brings us to Section 1, the Cosmic Command Center.
Now, to really grasp what the exiled Apostle John is experiencing out there on the rocky, dry prison island of Patmos, we kind of have to drop that modern stereotype of heaven. You know the one, a quiet waiting room where people just sit on clouds playing harps. In the ancient world, receiving a call from God meant being admitted directly into the sod, or the secret council of heaven. Think of it more like a massive cosmic parliament. When John looks up, he isn't seeing a distant, passive God. He is looking right at the administrative command center of the universe, the very place where the fate of nations is being decided. And standing right in the middle of that intense heavenly setup is a familiar yet terrifyingly transformed figure. John doesn't find the quiet Galilean preacher we read about in the Gospels. He finds the Lord of the cosmos. In the source text uses brilliantly visceral language here. It says his head and hair are as white as snow-white wool. His eyes are literally blazing like fire. His feet glow like bronze fresh from a furnace, and his voice sounds like a roaring waterfall. It's a staggering, overwhelming picture of the Son of Man.
But here's the thing, this isn't just random, chaotic artwork. Our source material points out three major ancient connections that any first-century reader would have immediately recognized. First off, in the Book of 1 Enoch, there's a glowing Son of Man sitting on a throne, acting as a cosmic judge who unseats earthly tyrants. Second, over in the text of 4 Ezra, there's a powerful figure rising from the sea with a voice like fire and a gaze that literally shakes the earth. And third, this all connects deeply to Merkabah, or throne chariot mysticism, where believers sought intense ascensions through heavenly halls just to see the divine glory. So John is speaking a very specific visual language that his ancient audience understood perfectly.
Moving on to Section 2, the Keys of Death and Hell.
I mean, you can just imagine John's reaction to stepping into this intense throne room. He literally falls at Christ's feet as dead in sheer mortal terror. But then, the glorified Lord places his right hand on the fallen apostle and says something incredible. "Fear not, I am he that liveth, and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and have the keys of hell and of death." Think about the political context of that for a second. Roman emperors might have held temporary keys to local prison cells. They have the power to lock John up on a remote island, sure. But here, Christ is revealing that he holds the absolute master keys over Hades and Thanos. That means complete absolute authority over the world of the dead and the power to break physical death itself. It totally supersedes any earthly localized control.
Which leads us to Section 3, the Kirtland Temple Parallels.
Now, our source material draws a really fascinating connection between this ancient vision and Latter-day Saint theology, specifically looking at a deeply familiar event that happened inside the Kirtland Temple on April 3, 1836. The visual and thematic descriptors between the two events are practically identical. On Patmos, John describes eyes as a flame of fire, hair white as snow, a voice like many waters, and the reception of ultimate keys. Meanwhile, centuries later in Kirtland, Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery describe the exact same personage: eyes as a flame of fire, hair white like pure snow, a voice like the rushing of great waters, followed by the bestowing of specific keys of authority. In both of these accounts, the heavy curtain between earth and the divine council pulls back, and seeing Jehovah is immediately tied to the passing of real, tangible, authoritative keys.
And this parallel really helps us understand the theology behind the vision. You see, early Latter-day Saint thinkers like Joseph Smith and Orson Pratt viewed resurrected beings very specifically. They didn't see them as abstract, ghostly shadows floating around. As Joseph Smith stated, God himself was once as we are now and is an exalted man and sits enthroned in yonder heavens. They believed resurrected beings were real, refined physical forms that operate by actual divine laws. So when John sees Christ with feet glowing like molten bronze, from this theological perspective, he's looking at an exalted, resurrected human being who has completely mastered physical matter and totally conquered death.
Let's dive into Section 4, the architecture of apostasy.
In John's vision, Christ isn't just standing out in some empty void. He's standing directly among 7 golden lampstands. These represent 7 real churches, actual congregations located on a circular mail route in ancient Asia Minor. And this brilliantly illustrates a powerful metaphor. Think about it. A lampstand doesn't create its own light, right? It just holds the flame that was given to it. Christ is walking among these lampstands, which means he knows their struggles, their bad choices, and exactly how they are compromising with the culture around them. The implication here is stark. If human institutions cut themselves off from the Holy Spirit and the real authority of Jesus, the lampstand becomes nothing more than an empty piece of metal. And that highlights a simple spiritual law about how human groups tend to fall away over time. Our source points out that early Latter-day Saint leaders like Brigham Young and Parley P. Pratt used this exact framework to explain historical apostasy. They argued that the ancient church didn't just fall because the Romans persecuted them from the outside. No, it broke down from the inside. People swapped direct revelation for human philosophy, they yielded to pride, and they settled for a comfortable, fake religion. When the spiritual light leaves, the institution is really just going through the motions.
And that brings us right to Section 5, applying Revelation today.
Because, let's face it, we live in a noisy, modern world filled with endless social media panic and loud voices telling us exactly what we should be terrified of next. So how does Revelation actually help us with that? Well, the source material gives us 3 direct applications. First, focus on the big picture. We need the kind of spiritual focus John had on Patmos. When you step back from the constant scrolling and realize that God's cosmic parliament is actually the one in control of history, the loud drama of modern politics suddenly looks incredibly small. Second, don't fear counterfeit power. And third, keep your light burning. Let's zoom in a bit closer on those last 2.
Just look at the stark contrast between the world's power and Christ's power. The world tries to control people through fear, right? Fear of being left out, fear of losing money, fear of losing status. The world's keys are incredibly localized, they're temporary, and they fade away with earthly empires. But Christ's keys, they hold actual power over Hades and death. They represent absolute cosmic jurisdiction, and they endure eternally. The first chapter of Revelation is fundamentally asking us, what are you actually afraid of? There's absolutely no need to fear the counterfeit, temporary power of earthly trends when you understand who holds the master keys.
Which brings us to the final application. Hold up his light and stand strong in his authority. It's a direct invitation to check your own spiritual light. It is so easy to drift into just going through the motions, acting religious on the outside, but slowly becoming an empty metal lampstand, forgetting why you even cared in the first place. The message of Revelation isn't to sit on the sidelines and wait in fear for the bad things to pass. It's a call to look past the shallow distractions of the world and actually listen to that voice that sounds like rushing waters.
So the crucial point we want to leave you with today is simply this. If the Lord holds the actual keys to death and life, what can any earthly trend, bully, or political empire really do to you? When that heavy curtain is finally pulled back, when the apocalypse happens, we see that true power has always been in the hands of the one who conquered death. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. We hope this leaves you feeling empowered, unafraid, and totally eager to dive even deeper into the source text yourself.